Hey, it's Clay. Welcome to another video. This is going to be another swing analysis for formerly Rage 0015. Submitted a swing to the golf subreddit. So let's go ahead and take a look. Now, the video that I got doesn't start quite at the beginning of setup, and it appears to be a little bit off-centered. Just for future reference, I typically would love to see a video that goes right on the toe line or thereabouts and is maybe about waist height. So you'd want it, so you're a little bit over here to the right. You know, if I draw a straight line, you're maybe just kind of angled off a little bit to the right. And then second, there's a little bit of movement. I believe it's probably a handheld camera, and that's okay. But I draw this line to give me a perspective on how things move throughout the swing. So when I draw other lines, well, if the camera is moving a lot, then those lines are not really useful. So, but anyways, we're gonna see if we can't persevere through that and offer up a good analysis. Anyways, to start off with, as we go through the swing, kind of the big things that I notice here are mostly just related to posture, and there's a little bit here on the release, and maybe the path of the club is a little steep in this position here, causing some early extension. But so let's talk about some of that stuff. Setup is pretty critical, and I always think that you need to start with addressing your setup. Now, typically with early extension, one of the important factors to look at is your amount of squat, or I call it kind of athletic readiness. Which is a little bit counterintuitive because in most sports, if you've played sports in the past, like baseball or basketball or football, you have kind of this generic athletic stance, right, where you're flexed at the knees and at the hips, and you're kind of ready to react to some sort of movement that's going to come at you. Well, in golf, it's a little bit different because there is no reaction, meaning everything is right in front of you. The golf ball is sitting still, and you're standing still, and so you don't have that same need to spring into reaction. Second, when you set up, that's actually not the most important time to be athletic. The most important moment to be athletic is really right in about here. When you begin to make your transition, you come down, right? So when you start coming into your downswing, this movement right here, that's the most important time to be athletic. And so one of the things that I would notice is that you have a pretty significant amount of flex here in the knees and then at the hips. And I would want to maybe see if you could straighten some of this a little bit or relax it a little bit. And the idea is that if you kind of think of, in science, I think there's some sort of law of physics that talks about equal and opposite reactions. Well, I think oftentimes in the golf swing that is true in many areas. What you do at the beginning has a domino effect to kind of create the opposite at impact. So if you start off with a lot of flex, then you end up, look where you end up here at the finish, at impact, right? You have your hips have moved forward quite a bit, your head has come back, and actually you've straightened, you're taller. And for the most part, you actually, in the most ideal world, many of the best professional swings in the world display the opposite characteristics, where they would start in a position kind of like this, right? You could see you have much less flex in your hips and in your knees. Your hands are more upright. Your head is taller. And then actually, if your impact position was more like this, where your hips have gone back, your head has actually gone down, and you've got a nice, athletic back position here. So that would kind of be my first recommendation, would be to have a little bit of a softer setup. And so, just for example, if we can look at the golf swing of, let's look at someone like, let's look at a Francesco Molinari. If you look at this setup, you can see that he's actually quite relaxed when it comes to some of the angles that he's got going on. If we can maybe see if we can't find a way to get this to be side by side with you. Actually, I think I can do this. So if you kind of just do a little bit of a comparison with how some of the angles are being presented, I think you would definitely note that, if you go from his heel to his knee, from his knee to his hip, from his hip to his spine, just follow. It's a much more straight up line. Whereas on your side, we've got definitely more knee flex and then a fair bit more hip flex. So I'm not necessarily saying you have to copy Molinari, but just using this as an example of what a tour professional might look like, a little bit more relaxed. So think about that to start with. So now let's kind of follow this up. Actually, there's a lot of movement here to like and some very good things going on. It looks to me like your grip is doing pretty well. I can see the angle of the face here. It's kind of pointing down at the ball or maybe just slightly above, and that's perfectly good. Now I can't really see the grip to tell for sure, so we'll want to keep an eye on that as we go. But that's good. This is a nice position here where you're making a 90-degree angle kind of from your lead forearm to the golf club. You haven't really sucked the club too far inside, so some good movements there. Now as we get up to this position, I would notice, watch how your head is moving forward. Okay, and actually you're coming down. So your head has started up here and has come in this direction. That's, I think, the first problem that we run into here in terms of spine angle. I guess I would just encourage you to think about there being like a steel rod running through your spine. And as you can see at this position, you've actually moved kind of like this. Try to keep that maintained as well as possible. And if anything, I would encourage you to think that you're getting even slightly taller, extending the spine. Because if your current swing, which probably feels normal or natural, means that you dip down, then you actually want to counteract that and feel as if you get taller. Now, this might help. The setup changes we talked about might fix that in and of itself. But just try to really think about that as a backswing thought. Okay, the next variable I want to point out, the club face looks like it's in a pretty solid position right here. You've got a little bit of a cup here in that wrist. It's not quite accurate. More like that. Now, I would tend to encourage, especially if you slice the ball at all, really try to consider feeling like your wrist stays very flat through the backswing. So you're actually you would need to bow it more so that it would cause it to be more flat. You want to really think of your wrist your wrist conditions as the primary thing that controls the angle of the club face, and that is a critically important variable. And so I would really the setup changes, and then consider trying to really keep this wrist flat. Another little maybe nitpick thing would be to try and extend this position a little bit, meaning feel as if you're taking the butt of the club and pushing it away from you. So you want to maximize some of that, and that would mostly mean straightening the angle of your right elbow. You really don't want the right elbow to be kind of doing a bicep curl motion in the backswing where it becomes very flexed. You want to keep it at about 90 degrees or maybe perhaps even a little less than that. So I think that those positions will help a little bit. Then, what I'm going to talk about from here on out is how everything we've just discussed plays itself out in the downswing. I would definitely recommend you follow this and keep some of this in mind, but start with the things I've already told you to do, and a lot of that might take a while to even implement, right? The setup changes in the backswing, the wrist change, some of those little things, the spine angle, that's like enough content right there to even call it a pretty thorough lesson. But we're just going to touch on how some of these things play out just for the sake of understanding, okay? So as you get back, now this is kind of an interesting thing to note. Now again, the camera angle isn't perfect, but I'm tracking the angle of the shaft. And what do? So this is your backswing. This is the angle of the shaft in the backswing. As we keep going, where are you at coming down? Okay, so I think you can notice that you are you have moved with a little bit of an this is kind of a little bit of an over the top movement. The shaft is flexing, so the line isn't quite right, but kind of gotten a little bit over the top and a little bit steep. Now, I think over the top and steep in the transition is a tough spot to be in. I would think this might be something to work on as well, a little bit more down the line, but ideally you want to be, let's go back to a Francesco. You ideally want to be having the club laid down a little bit more, what is called shallowing. Okay, so I'm not going to draw a line, but you can see the club is pretty upright here. And then he just lays it down ever so slightly. So if in the previous, the club was kind of in this position, he has laid it down so that the head is farther back behind him and is traveling kind of more around his body. Okay, that's a really good thing and something that you want. You don't want it to be in a position like this where you're flatter in the backswing and then steeper in the downswing. And then the kind of the last thing I would point out is just how, as I see it, the left hip, if you follow your left hip right here, in a professional swing, what it would tend to be doing is it would be moving very, very aggressively back and around to clear out of the way and to open up. With your swing, I see more of, let's get rid of some of these lines. I see more of a situation where your lead hip really isn't doing much. You can see even still here, it's kind of maintained. It's really your right hip that has driving forward. Okay, and that, as you can see, creates some of this early extension look where when I say extension, I'm talking about getting taller. The most extended that your body could be, if your spine and your back and your hips would be like if you were to do like a pencil, like a swan dive or something like that. And then the most flexed you could be, the opposite of extension, would be to do like a fetal position ball curl. Okay, you're going from a little bit of flexion, you've got this angle here, to quite extended where your angle has decreased, and you don't really want that. You want to be, you actually want to be, when you get up here, you want to be flexing. So you want to start here, and now I'm going backwards, right? I'm going back, but your spine, it would be best if you were kind of with this look at the top. Imagine that your arms in the club are at the top, and then as you transition down, you flex down like this. So basically you want to flip it. You want to start taller and then flex down a little bit more and really clear the left side of your body out of the way. Try to keep this hip right where it is, and instead open the door. If your body's a door, open the door by clearing the left side out of the way. Okay? And that will, what you're doing with your hips will really help you as far as getting the shaft to lay down, right? Because then your right elbow and your right shoulder have room to drive in towards the ball, which will help lay down the shaft. So then as we get into impact, there's definitely some of that early extension going on. You can see how much space you've created from this line, which marked your tush at setup. Your head has raised up. And then I think because of that, you get a little bit, your release is okay. It's a little bit kind of maybe out to in with kind of more of a, looks like be like a fading or slicing ball flight. So try to get a little bit more of that rotation going through. And everything I just discussed will enable you to be in a better position up top, to really just turn your body and use some of your powerful muscles in your legs and in your trunk and in your chest to drive the swing. So please let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Consider subscribing if you're interested in more content like this, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.